Today, we're diving deep into one of Australia's most infamous criminal cases. I mean, this is a story about manipulation, unbelievable sadism, and a killing spree that somehow went undetected for 7 whole years. We're going to break down the chilling case of the Snowtown Murders.
So, where do we even begin with a story like this? Well, let's start right at the moment this whole thing just exploded into the public consciousness, with a discovery that would, and I mean this, absolutely shock a nation.
Okay, so picture this. We're in a little place called Snowtown, South Australia. It's a small, quiet, unassuming town right in the middle of the wheat belt. You know the type. It's the kind of place where, really, nothing ever happens. Well, until it did.
So it's May 1999. Police get a tip, and it leads them to this old, disused bank. They go inside, make their way to the vault, and what do they find? 6 heavy-duty plastic barrels, just sealed and waiting.
And what was inside? Well, one investigator called it a chamber of horrors. I mean, that's a direct quote, because inside those barrels, they found the dismembered remains of 8 victims, all submerged in hydrochloric acid. It was just a scene so grotesque, it truly defied imagination. So right away, the big question is, how? How could something like this possibly happen? Well, to understand that, we actually have to leave Snowtown. We need to travel about 150 kilometers away to the northern suburbs of Adelaide, because that's where we'll meet the man at the very center of this spiderweb of horror. The ringleader's name was John Bunting, and he operated under this really twisted belief system, this missionary motivation. He truly saw himself as a vigilante, someone who is cleansing society. And this so-called mission of his, it became the perfect weapon to justify his absolutely heinous actions, and, crucially, to manipulate everyone around him. And if you look at Bunting's background, it's just a textbook and, frankly, chilling portrait of escalating psychopathy. I mean, look at this. He worked in an abattoir and a crematorium, so he was completely desensitized to death and dismemberment. He had this insane need for control, even demanding his victims call him God. But what's maybe most disturbing, he systematically groomed his own stepson, James Valsakis, and pulled him into this world of violence when James was just 14 years old. But here's the thing. Bunting wasn't some lone wolf acting alone. No way. He was an architect. He actually built the team, a whole collective, and each person had a very specific role. You had Bunting, of course, the ideological engine behind it all. Then there was Robert Wagner. He was the lead accomplice, the enforcer. You've got James Vlassakis, the tragic insider, who was both a witness and a participant. And then Mark Haydon, who handled logistics and disposal. You see, this wasn't random at all. It was a full-blown killing operation.
Okay, so with his crew all assembled, Bunting's violent ideology it morphed into something else entirely. It became a systematic killing spree. And this wasn't just a sudden burst of violence. You have to understand, this was a campaign of terror that went on for 7 years.
And this timeline, man, it just shows the chilling evolution of their crimes. It all started back in '92, right? They targeted a man, Bunting, just accused of being a pedophile. But then, watch how it changes. By 1995, the motive shifts. Now they're murdering for money, for financial gain, stealing welfare payments. And then it gets even darker. They start internal purges, killing their own accomplices. It was a complete descent into total depravity that only ended, get this, 12 days before they were finally caught. So, yeah, while this whole thing might have started as some kind of twisted mission, you can see right here in the numbers that greed and control took over, and fast. A full third of the murders were primarily for money, just stealing pensions and benefits. Another quarter, that was all about domestic control and, getting rid of potential witnesses. The ideology? It was really just a cover story for something much, much uglier.
So, 7 years they operated in the shadows. How did they finally get caught? How did this whole spiderweb unravel? Let's break down the investigation that brought this whole nightmare to light.
Well, it was really a combination of good, methodical police work and the killer's own shocking arrogance. It all started with a financial trail. Cops noticed that several missing people were somehow still having their bank accounts accessed. That simple fact eventually led them to the vault in Snowtown. But the real smoking guns? The killers provided those themselves. Bunting had something he called a rock spider wall, a literal chart of his victims, and they made these horrific audio tapes of the victims being tortured. In the end, their own meticulous, disgusting record-keeping was their downfall. Now, the crime scene itself, those barrels, presented this totally unprecedented forensics challenge. Here's the wild part. The acid was obviously meant to destroy all the evidence, right? But the sheer volume of, well, body fluids actually neutralized the acid. So in a bizarre paradox, it preserved some of the remains, while at the same time completely destroying any and all DNA evidence. It was a nightmare. Investigators had to fall back on things like dental records and skeletal analysis to figure out who the victims were.
But you know, the convictions and the jail sentences, that wasn't the end of the story, not by a long shot. This case has cast a long, dark shadow over the entire state of South Australia that, honestly, continues to this very day. It's impacted law, politics, and the very identity of a town.
And this is such a crucial point to understand. We call them the Snowtown Murders, but Snowtown was just the final dumping ground. The real origin story, the crucible where all these horrors were forged, was nearly 150 kilometers away in Salisbury North. That's where you had this breakdown in social cohesion, and it created a situation where predators could prey on the vulnerable, on the marginalized, and go completely undetected for years and years.
And believe it or not, the fallout is still happening right now. Just recently, in 2024, accomplice Mark Hayden was released from prison. Then, in 2025, a massive public firestorm erupted over the potential parole of James Flasakis. That decision was ultimately overturned, with the commissioner citing the, quote, disgustingly unusual nature of the crimes. But these events, happening decades later, have just reignited all that public trauma and created very real political shockwaves.
And when I say political shockwaves, I mean it. You can see the direct impact right here. In the 2026 state election, the One Nation Party, which was running on a very tough-on-crime platform, managed to win 4 regional seats, and one of those was the very electorate that includes Snowtown. This was a major political shift, and you can draw a direct line from it right back to the long, lingering shadow of this case.
So all of this, it just leaves us with a final and really difficult question. You know, when prison sentences are served and they end, but the trauma for the families and for an entire community, that never truly ends. So for crimes of this magnitude, you have to ask yourself, what does justice really look like?